Look at the bird, it's flying so high. Look at the stars, shining so bright in the middle of the night. Oh, look, there's a shooting star. Do you ever wonder who created this and who created that? Allah created everything. What about that tree, so beautiful and green? Can you see the wind? Amazing how honey comes from bees. Oh look, there's an elephant washing his feet. So many beautiful animals, look and you'll see. Do you ever wonder who created this and who created that? Allah created everything. Beautiful plants, so many different shapes. White fluffy clouds that send down the rain. Can you see the rivers? Can you see the mountains? Can you see
Hey, 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 it's Green Thumbs Up Day. Yes, it is. It's another Sunday and it's another Green Day. Trying this again. I hope you're all well out there in Radio Alan Starland. This is Green Thumbs Up. That's a gardening and natural living show you didn't know that you needed. And I'm Rabia Carvalho. How has the week been treating you? Have you been out in the sky? How beautiful. We have a beautiful day today. The skies are overcast over, and that only has beauty because they've got a little bit of respite from the incredible heat that we have had. And boy, oh, has it been hot. So whether you're joining us on 90.4 FM in Durban or 105.6 in Pietermaritzburg, or maybe you're audio streaming, or maybe you are joining us on Facebook and YouTube, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Boy, oh, we do have an interesting show for you today. On the show, as you know, we talk of all things gardening and we talk of all things natural living. Now, sometimes it's off-grid living. Sometimes it's gardening with copper rods. Sometimes we're talking about the deepest blue oceans, as we did last week. And today we have a very, very interesting topic for you. It's one of those things that if you were having a conversation with some friends around the table, you could say, "Oh, did you know what I learned? I learned something quite incredible that I bet you didn't know." And 10 to 1, they probably don't, because today we're talking about luminescence. And we have a very, very special guest with us today that I've been trying to get on our show for a very long time. You see, now luminescence, first of all, it reminds us that even the tiniest grain of sand has a story to tell. And with the right tools, we can uncover those stories and better understand our world. So luminescence is about telling time, I suppose. But there is someone who's going to give us a lot more information about that. She's a brilliant mind behind today's discussion, and she's joining us via video streaming, and and she is just the most amazing person. She's not just a researcher. Mary Evans is an associate professor in the School of Geography, Archaeology and Environmental Studies at the University of Witwatersrand, my alma mater. She has over 25 years of teaching experience. She lectures in geology, geography, archaeology, and geochronology. But folks, this is not going to go above anybody's head. This is just it's going to be informative. She supervised numerous honors, masters, PhD students in various fields, including geochronology, archaeology, geosciences, water quality, 4IR technologies in the energy sector, machine learning. Wow, wow, wow. In fact, she was recognized for her teaching excellence, and she received WITS's Convocations Distinguished Teacher and Distinguished Team Teachers Award and the WITS Vice Chancellor's Team Teaching Award. Now, she is the only optically stimulated luminescence dating, wow, scientist in South Africa. And she's at Wits University, and she manages the only luminescence dating laboratory in the country. We're not talking about dating like when you make a date with your friends. No, we're talking about dating of things, dating, when you try to figure out how old things are and you hear about carbon dating, and she does things with light. She's qualified as a certified director at the Institute of Directors in South Africa, and she consults with private companies on environmental and sustainability challenges and policies, focusing on the risks posed by climate change. So it is right up the alley of Green Thumbs Up. And I'm so grateful that she could make the time for us this morning. Prof. Mary, welcome to Radio Al-Ansar. Welcome to Green Thumbs Up. Thank you for making the time for us this morning.
Thank you, Rabia. I should thank you for inviting me to talk about a subject that I'm very, very passionate about. And you're right, not many people know about luminescence dating, and people understand a little bit about carbon dating and not sure how the two go together. And often they are conflated. So I'm quite excited to be able to pull that apart and to explain it.
And I am so glad that you mention it, because that's the very first thing on my mind, because I sat there during the graduation ceremony last year. I was at a graduation ceremony for the IMM Graduate School, and Prof. Mary Evans was the guest speaker. And you were talking about, telling on a grain of sand, like where this grain has been. And my eyes were open all the way to the back of my skull. And then I thought, how does this tie in with carbon dating? Because every time there's a fossil, we got to carbon date it, or there's a body gets found. Recently, there was a mummy that was found and they carbon dating it. But now you're using light. Please tell us, what is the difference firstly between those two?
Okay, so carbon dating is based basically on carbon-14, which is an isotope of carbon. It's quite rare. So all living things absorb carbon. We are carbon-based organisms. And when we die, the carbon breaks down. So carbon-14 breaks down to a stable form of nitrogen over a period of time called its half-life, right?
Okay.
Which means that you can only use carbon dating for carbon-based organisms. And the half-life of carbon is about 1,700 years, which means that as it breaks down over a 50,000-year period, which means you can only date something using carbon dating if it's within that 50,000-year period, right? Beyond 50,000, carbon dating doesn't apply any longer. And you cannot use it to date ceramics, for example. You can't use it to date sediment. You can't use it to date anything that is not carbon-based. And so it is for trees, we use it for plants, we use it for fossils, as you mentioned. You can date any kind of organic matter, right? Sometimes they use it for soil, because in soil, leaves and things have broken up and creates bulk carbon. But once that organism is older than 50,000, you're going to get an infinite age, it's called. In other words, it's an undefined age. We can't say how old it is. And so for a long time, there's been a gap in the dating. You can then move on to more geological dating, which is uranium, thorium, and that dates things for hundreds of thousands and millions of years. So what it is what happens between 50,000 and, say, 1 million? There was a gap.
Okay.
And about 25 years ago, somebody came up with luminescence dating. And so luminescence dating doesn't date organic matter. It literally dates, as you mentioned, quartz grains, tiny little, if you're on the beach, you'll see them, sand grains. That's what quartz grains essentially are. But quartz grains are so interesting. I know people kick them around and they dig on the beach and whatever. But if you picked one up and you put it under a microscope, they're really, really interesting little
I'm fascinated by quartz ever since I was reading up the work of Vogel, and he talked about crystal, Vogel crystals, and the way that crystals develop and the way that they grow over time, and how the crystal structure forms, and how that then can be used for energy healing with crystals. Crystals are fascinating. So when you say quartz, I'm like, bing, I hear you.
And you hear, I mean, you get beautiful quartz. You'll see people have rose quartz in their gardens, and they have there's amber quartz, and there's just plain clear quartz. They really are beautiful crystals. And that is the important part about luminescence dating, is that there's a crystal structure. And the way I explain it is kind of, if you think of lace, beautiful lace that is kind of knitted together, that is the crystal structure. But sometimes if you're wearing a lace dress and you get caught on a bush, the lace tears. And in a crystal structure, that lace tear traps electrons. So, you know, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible.
Yes.
The electrons get trapped in that space. If you shine a light on the electron, it becomes excited and it jumps out of that trap into another state. And in that excited state, it gives off light. And that is what the luminescence part is, right?
So
And
you're able to see what is trapped inside the quartz.
You don't see it, it's an electron, so it's microscopic.
Right.
But what you do see is the effect. The effect of the electron being stimulated gives off light. And you can see the light. So it's very, very tiny little flash of light. But we have an instrument called a photomultiplier. The photomultiplier then multiplies that light, and then you can see it. And the machine that we have can collect that light and then tell us how much light is given off, right?
So you could theoretically look at, a little piece of the stone from the pyramids we were saying earlier, and tell us with more precision when it came from.
Okay, so what we need to understand is with carbon dating, if we just go back, when you get a carbon date, the date tells you the time that organism died. Okay, because it's absorbing carbon all through its life, and as soon as it dies, it stops absorbing carbon, and so you can measure when it died. With luminescence dating, you can measure when that crystal was buried. In other words, it stops absorbing light. Okay. So if you're going to date, let's say, the pyramids, you have to find a block that has been, so one block placed on top of another, and you can get the crystals between those two blocks. You can tell when that one block was placed on the other. Okay.
Oh, I get it. Because you couldn't, you've got to see when it stopped receiving light.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. So what we do is, for example, we dig trenches and then we take a sample below the surface, and then we will know when was that sediment deposited. Okay.
So you would need to work in the dark very much then, because if you expose it to light, it's going to now receive light.
That's right. So we call that a zeroing event. When you expose it to light, all the radiation that crystal has absorbed is set to zero. So when we take the sample out, we take it out in dark tubes. We wrap it in black plastic bags. We take it into my laboratory, which is a red light, very much like the old photo developing labs. It stays in the red light, and we work with it in red light. The only time we expose it to blue light is when we are doing the measurements. So as we expose it to light, the electron jumps out. It gives off usually a purple light, and our photomultiplier captures that and measures it. So it's all done in red light. It's all done in the dark. If we can, so say we wanted to go back to the example of the pyramid, say we wanted to date that, right? Possibly the best way to do it would be to wait until midnight, until it's dark and there's no moonlight. And as long as there's no city lights shining on it, as long as it's pitch dark, we can then scrape out the quartz grains, put it in a plastic bag, a black bag, and bring it to the lab. So it mustn't be exposed to light along the way. We've often had problems when people don't understand that, and they sample in daylight and they bring it to us. And if we measure it, we will get a zero date. We will get the date of today, which is what you want. Yeah.
Okay. So I could imagine then that, if you wanted to get something, say, from the center of the Sphinx from underground, you'd have to kind of drill in the dark, take it out, and then you mentioned the purple light. Do the lights colors vary that these grains glow? Do they glow different light colors?
So not really. I mean, they give off usually white light, but funny enough, we tested this where we irradiated grains to around a million years. So in other words, we knew that they were a million years old. They've absorbed enough radiation to give us a million-year date, and then we heated them. We threw them on a hot plate, and they started popping, and they gave off purple light. But what was funny about that story is that I saw purple, my colleague saw green, and someone else
How
saw
does that
white.
work?
I
Is it
think
because
it's
of our eyes?
the way our eyes receive light. And so light is really interesting. I mean, I work with light all the time. When I spoke to you earlier in the week, I asked what wavelength you were talking about. So light is really interesting. It's not just what we see. Sunlight extends across multiple wavelengths.
Yes.
And so I thought that was quite an interesting experiment. And we did it in front of a few people, and I saw purple. I was adamant it was purple, and they all saw different things. But the photomultiplier measures the amount of light, not the color of light, which is quite nice. Okay. So the amount of light we can then calculate equal to the amount of radiation that grain received. And then we do a small calculation to work out what the age is then based on that amount of light.
That's incredible. What's the oldest thing that maybe that you've seen, that you've worked with? How far back have you gone?
Now that is also quite interesting. When I get the samples in, for me it's just sand, and then we clean it until we get quartz grains, and so they don't have any context when I'm busy working with it, right? But at the end, when we know the age, I can sit there and say, in my hand, I have sediment that was deposited when Jesus was walking the earth, or when the pyramids were built, or when Prophet Muhammad was around, or when, in fact, the last really interesting thing we date quite a lot of interesting, but the last thing we did was the Homo naledi fossils that were discovered. So we didn't date the bones because they were too old for carbon dating, but we dated the sediment that it was lying in. And so based on the fact that the hominid was buried or laid down, the sediment beneath it stopped being exposed to light. And we could date that, and we got to an age about 250,000 years, which is incredible. Wow. A different team dated the teeth using the enamel, and they use a different method, which is called electron spin resonance, and they came to the similar age. And so using the two methods, we could say with some confidence that Homo naledi lived about 250,000 years ago.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And, it just brings to mind also, folks, if you find like something like this, don't disturb it. Call the scientists, because we cannot let light into those grains of sand. That is fantastic. 250,000 years back. Well, that throws a spanner in lots of theories about how old the Earth is.
So we can, with luminescence, we can date back to about 1 million years. There's a different technique, it's a similar technique, but it doesn't use blue light to stimulate the grains. It uses red light. So infrared.
I'm a red light lady. I love it.
And so it uses infrared, and we don't use the quartz grains, we use what are feldspar grains. So it's a potassium feldspar. You also see them, but you're not aware of it as much because it's a much finer grain. It kind of sits between the quartz grains, but the feldspar holds radiation for much longer period of time. And so using feldspar, you can date to much later, probably about 2 million years, quite possibly depending on the environment in which it absorbed radiation. So we use both.
Yeah. That's incredible. We're going to come back and talk to you some more about this. Folks, we're speaking to Professor Mary Evans, and we're talking about the science of luminescence, which is dating things all the way back. I mean, to date the soil underneath a body that was found 250,000 years ago is quite something. So to be able to do that is amazing. So don't go away. We'll be back right after this ad break. Stay with us. Green thumbs up on Radio Al Ansar.
Radio Al Ansar, 24/7, 365.
It's official. Checkers Foods Kawi Park is our first food store with a halal butchery, bakery and deli certified by NIHT, the National Independent Halal Trust. This will ensure high standards and ethical practices across our butchery, bakery and deli from farm to table. So visit Checkers Foods Kawi Park for an exceptional shopping experience that keeps getting better and better.
Al Ansar Helping Hands with Aisha Jamal brings you the Animal Welfare Campaign. Help us make a difference.
Hey, little
Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, "Verily, there is heavenly reward for every act of kindness done to a living animal." We are in need of cat food, dog food, blankets, shelter, weatherproof kennels, and funds towards the above, as well as towards urgent cases where animals require medical attention. WhatsApp 060-971-9955 or 084-3041-683. Drop-off zone 207 West Road, Overport. Al Ansar, making a difference.
The Sunday Lounge with Salma Kazi Wahab, 10 to 12. Latest nasheeds, celebrity artist legends. Events, news from the Nabi world. The Sunday Lounge with Salma Kazi Wahab.
Station for Conversation, Radio Al Ansar.
Look at the sun, look at the sky, look at the bird.
You're back with Green Thumbs Up on Radio Al Ansar, and I am Rabia Carvalho. I'm speaking this morning to Professor Mary Evans, who is our luminescence expert in South Africa. I can say that because that is what you are. And we're talking about dating of historical things, particularly in this case, sediment, and the importance of not disturbing it so that we can actually tell how old things are. So welcome back, Prof. Mary. We're talking about luminescence. And I wanted to ask you, has the technology of luminescence developed or grown over the years?
Oh, absolutely. And every year we have a conference, and every year people come with new methodologies, new ways in which to use it. So one of the things I didn't explain is that we also use luminescence dating for pottery and archaeological artifacts. So we can date those and we can say when they were used, pre-farming, post-farming. We also used luminescence a while back to date some footprints in Namibia. So there was a footprint cast and we could get the sediment beneath that wasn't exposed to light. And we could date footprints and we could show that there were cattle herder children, because there were small feet, cattle herder children were running around that area about 1,500 years ago. So, and we could date pottery back to about 2,000 years ago. So really interesting things. We can also use it to date when a last fault line occurred. So this is for more geological interest. When faults occur, the earth is heated through that shear zone. And because luminescence also, the early techniques were called thermoluminescence. In other words, it was heat that stimulated instead of light. We can date things that were heated, and we can date when they were last heated. So it has quite a lot of application. And as mentioned, in answer to your question, the technique has advanced quite a bit in order to include more and more applications.
And are there specific discoveries in South Africa that wouldn't have been possible without luminescence? I mean, you mentioned...
Absolutely. So a lot of luminescence went into cave sites because it has a huge archaeological application. And so Border Cave, down the Cape, Classies River, Rose Cottage Cave. These are all sites in South Africa, even
Wow.
Mulu Cave up in Limpopo, that area. At the moment, we're busy with Cave of Hearts, which is near Makapan's Valley. So a lot of cave, because this is where our early hominins settled and lived, and so we can explore what it is that they did, whether they used fire or not, because of that heat application. When they lived there, how long they stayed, which layers of the earth they occupied, what's the new layer, and so on. So a lot of work has gone into understanding archaeological sites using luminescence dating. Yes.
It's fantastic. And do you think that we could use luminescence perhaps to study the history of climate change and have that maybe inform, what we do about climate change going forward?
Absolutely. So a lot of work that we've been doing now has got to do with unpacking. So we call it paleo-environmental reconstruction. We're reconstructing the environment of the past. So if we can understand when the climate happened, changed. So for example, we know there was a change 6,000 years ago. Then we know there was a change 2,000 years ago, and how it affected the environment at that time, we can then kind of model what will happen in the future. So we have a good idea that as the climate as the temperatures are increasing, we've seen what happened in the past. We can then model what might happen in the future. So I know we've had terrible heat waves recently. It's been extremely hot. Every year, the meteorological societies say this is the hottest temperatures on record. Then the next year, it's the hottest temperature on record, because the temperatures are getting hotter and hotter. And because we can see what happened in the past and when that happened using the dating techniques, we can predict to some extent what the future will look like as the temperatures get higher and higher. Yes.
Wow. Are there any other applications, like if you were to, I don't know, for art restoration, for instance, would luminescence be, something that you could apply there, or other fields?
So there are investigations around that, especially the new buzzword is around the glacial spaces or glacial landscapes. For art restoration and for dating of artwork, I think dendrochronology was more an appropriate dating technique because frames are wooden. And so using either dendro or carbon dating, if there's enough carbon stored in the frames, that has been done. There's a little bit of work been done on cave art, rock art, and using luminescence dating. These are early days, and so the methodology has been developed, and it might be possible that we can in fact then date the rock art that you find in caves using that.
That's absolutely amazing. Well, just one last question before you go. Has there been an instance where you were working on something and suddenly you said, wow, this is why I do this work?
I will not lie, often.
Okay.
And as I said, is as soon as we get an age, and I look at the age and I look at, what's happened around the world, when you have a minute and you go, and Home and a Lady was one of those examples where, we were all debating about what could have happened, how it happened, when these hominins were around, what they were doing. And suddenly we worked out the age and went, okay, they're not as old as we thought, but they're also not as young as we thought. And it's that it happens so often, just that moment of realization. We've dated numerous events. And before we start dating, we talk about, with the researchers, when we think it should have, when it happened or whatever. And then the age comes. I will tell you there's been some disappointment because some researchers think they've got something that is much older. And when we date it, we go, no, sorry, it's actually much younger than you thought. Absolutely. But that is also an exciting outcome.
It's absolutely fascinating. I've enjoyed listening to you tremendously. I think this is such a valuable conversation that we're having, because part of natural living is understanding the world around us. It's understanding the impact of climate change in how we grow our food. It's understanding the impact of climate change on what are we doing about medicine. We recently had somebody on the show who was talking about, the biomes in the earth and how that impacts the food that we grow and how that impacts the medicine that we're on, so that we take from nature. So thank you so much, Prof. Mary, for giving us of your time this morning. It's been wonderful talking to you. And if listeners want to know more, they could look up Luminescence, right?
I think absolutely, yes.
Luminescence says, well, thank you so much, Prof. Mary, for being with us on the show this morning. So, folks, that was Prof. Mary Evans. And you may be wondering, what on earth is going on? What's happening to Green Thumbs Up? But folks, when we're learning about growing food and we're learning about growing natural medicine and we're learning about the world around us, because it is gardening and natural living, it's really important to take a step back and say, hold on, the way we are growing our food is changing. You look at what they are doing to our seeds and how companies like Monsanto are kind of patenting our seeds. And that then impacts what we can grow and what we can't grow. But so does climate change. And so does the areas we live in. And to be able to look at the soil from a very different perspective and say, soil is for growing. But guess what? The soil, that soil that gardeners work with every day, is the thing that tells the story of where we came from. And in Islam, we know that we come from Allah, and to Allah we return. And we return into that soil. And we become part of that soil, right? That soil that we grow our foods in. So speaking of soil, I want to talk to you today about a plant of the month, a plant that I have selected for you for this month, and it is wild garlic. Now, you may have seen it growing on the streets, you may see it growing on pavements, and it's kind of these long bluish green thin leaves, almost like a chive, and then it's got this little purple flower. Now, I'm not talking about the big one, the agapanthus. I'm talking about the small ones. And that is called the wild garlic. And it's got quite a lot of applications from a natural perspective, but also from the perspective of health, right? So why would you want to have the wild garlic? Well, historically, let's just give it its botanical name. Wild garlic is Tulbachia violacea. Tulbachia violacea. It is actually a perennial plant. That means that it's there all year round. It doesn't die back in the winter. When winter comes, it doesn't disappear. But it is native, it is indigenous to South Africa, and particularly in Durban. You will see it growing maybe even alongside the beach. Although it's called wild garlic, it's not true garlic, although of course it smells like garlic, and if you were to give it a lickety lick, you might find that yes, indeed, it tastes like garlic as well, especially if you crush those leaves. Now, the smell is an insect repellent, obviously, so immediately you're thinking, aha, I can grow this on my windowsills. And if I grow it on my windowsills in some good soil, I can have some insect repellent to stop the mozzies from coming into the house. But it repels bad insects, but then it attracts good insects. And what are those? Our pollinators, our bees particularly, and our butterflies love wild garlic. So give it an opportunity. If you've got like a big pot and in it you've got a tree, maybe a fruit tree or a lollipop tree of roses, how pretty will it be to have the wild garlic beneath it, knowing that you're keeping bad insects at bay and you're attracting bees to pollinate. If you are struggling with pollinating your granadillas, some ladies have messaged and said, in other shows, my granadillas are not growing, the fruit isn't growing. Or maybe there's another fruit tree that it's not producing fruit. You're getting flowers, but you're not getting fruit. Try wild garlic to attract the bees to that particular tree, and that particular fruit may just grow for you. Now, it's been used as traditional medicine in the Zulu culture. for many, many years. And traditionally, it's been used as an antibacterial, as an antifungal, as an anti-inflammatory. But here's the interesting thing that I had not known about wild garlic until I had my son. And he's now 22, going on 23, so it's a long time now. But, babies get constipated. They do. And I discovered, and always, folks, take advice on this show as educational, consult with your medical practitioners. But I discovered that I could make a decoction. In other words, I could make a cup of tea with some wild garlic, and I could use that to wash baby's bottom. And two things happen. Bum rash disappears. And the other thing is that if you were to give the baby's bottom a little bit of a squirt with this water, almost as a little enema, right, with a baby enema syringe, the baby is able to pass his stool quite easily. Very, very important for babies and not harmful to babies. But this wild garlic has a lot of the same kind of cold and flu protection that normal garlic has. And so, yes, you could use it for coughs and colds and flus. And all you do again is crush those leaves, boil them, make your tea, and you can use it as a throat gargle. It does have a strong smell, but you could perhaps couple this with rosemary. So think of rosemary essential oil. Any essential oil is dangerous if ingested internally, so don't go out there drinking essential oils. However, that said, rosemary essential oil is one of those that is safest if you use it correctly. So always dilute an essential oil in a normal oil. Something like olive oil is fine. So you could take a teaspoon of olive oil, and into that you could throw 3 drops of rosemary essential oil. Mixy. And now you can take 1 drop of that and put it into your cup of tea with wild garlic and have a good old gargle. And that should soothe your sore throat. It is great for inflammations. And again, colds and flus opens up the airway. So if you were to steam with wild garlic, open up the airways, open up the sinuses, right? You could top that up, of course, speaking of colds and flus, with 1 drop of castor oil in each nostril if you are very, very clogged up. And that typically does help. Now, but it doesn't stop there. Wild garlic is so potent that it actually helps to regulate your blood pressure, and it improves circulation, which is why we say just because it's natural, just because it's a plant, doesn't mean it's not powerful, doesn't mean it can't interact with other medication that you're on. So if you're on medications where you would, that thin your blood, for instance, okay, or you're on cardiovascular medication to help your heart to pump better, okay, then this one is one you want to just watch out with, because it does regulate blood pressure, but that means it has an effect on circulation. However, if you don't have high blood pressure and you keep getting cold feet, a cup of wild garlic tea will do ya, because it'll help the circulation to go down to your feet. It's going to boost your immune system and your overall health. But again, doesn't stop there. Did you know that this wild garlic actually promotes healing of wounds? So if you've got a wound on you, you've had a scratch, don't apply things to open wounds, wash it off first, but you could make a tea of this and use that tea to wash off the wound. How would you make the tea? Always it is a teaspoon of the dry herb or a 1/4 cup of the fresh herb. Put into that a cup of boiling water, let it stand and talk to itself for 10 minutes, and then you can strain it and you can use that. So there it is. Isn't it actually amazing? Wild garlic. Now there's a backstory to this. Did you know that it wasn't just used in Africa, but it was actually part of European herbal medicine? It's always been considered a plant with protective properties. So protect you from bugs and flus and mosquitoes and infections, because it's an anti-inflammatory and inflammation. But of course, there are echoes of protection where people burnt this, to kind of cleanse the air and the environment around them. And they would use that to purify the air. So during outbreaks of disease, we're not talking spooks and things. where we're talking about cleansing the air. And so you could burn it to get rid of microbes in the air. It contains sulfur-based chemicals which are antimicrobial, and it's just such a humble little garden plant that just grows so prolifically and grows so easily. You could put it into your food. Yes, you can. It's going to impart a little garlic taste to it. Just a few fresh leaves, crush them slightly to release their oils, put them into water for about 10 minutes, and there you've got a tea. So you can use it, as I said, in cooking. If you wanted to add it to your soups and your stews and your salads, you're not just adding the flavor, but you're imparting to your food all the goodness that boosts your immune system, boosts your circulation, and so forth. So I hope you've learned a lot from our plant of the month today. And wild garlic is one of those things, as I say, that's easy to grow and it's easy to propagate. So if you see a wild garlic somewhere and you were to separate a bunch out and just take one little plant home with no time at all, it's going to spread, it's going to grow. It makes a lovely foundational plant if you're planting in layers. So if you've got a garden and you're looking out and you've got this big flower bed and you're wanting a plant that's taller in the back and then smaller and short, almost like a little step ladder, then these are beautiful little plants. They fill up a flower bed, they will fill up a pot, clear up that empty space that you've got, and of course they retain a lot of heat, the plants. So because they grow clumpy and they are retaining heat, they are going to actually help to keep the soil for your plant nice and cool. What kind of soil do they grow in? Anything. They are not fussy plants. Wild garlic will grow through rock. In fact, you may find it growing through your paving stones sometimes and wonder, what on earth is that? Yes, it is wild garlic, and it is a wonderful, wonderful thing that you can use. So I've often spoken about garlic and protecting rose bushes with garlic. Well, if you don't want to grow garlic because the garlic plant has a very kind of short life, right? It's an annual, it'll grow, it'll give you that head of that flower, which then turns to a head of a bunch of seeds, and it can take some time to grow and some time to harvest. Maybe you're wanting something that clumps up, then wild garlic is your plant of choice. Wild garlic reminds me a little sometimes of bulbine or bulbinella, and you'll see bulbinella also looks. So how do I explain this? Wild garlic looks like tall grass, not very tall, but about 30 centimeters. Okay, ruler's length, wild garlic, and it's a dark green, bluish shade of green. Bulbinella is similarly looking, also about 30 centimeters long, and it also clumps up, but the leaves are a shiny green, sometimes quite a light green, sometimes a little bit darker, and that gives you a yellow flower. Now, bulbine or bulbinella is the Burns plant. I love aloe vera, and we know aloe vera is the plant when it comes to burns. But bulbine and bulbinella is fantastic for burns. It's fantastic for skin acne, particularly if you're talking about sebaceous acne. You know, that kind of crusty, infectious, kind of, it spreads through the face. It's very uncomfortable, very painful. Bulbine is a great one to use. When you're using wild garlic or you're using bulbine, try to use plants that have previously flowered. So not a plant that has just germinated, because they are not as potent. They've not had time to develop the medicine within them. So take your bulbine, which is these thin strands, and if you cut open the leaf, you'll find there's a gel in there that's very reminiscent to aloe vera gel, but it's softer and it is more liquid. It is an anti-parasitic plant, just as aloe vera. So yes, you could harvest that gel, and yes, you could add it to honey, a tablespoon of honey, a teaspoon of the gel. You could mixy, and you could ingest that to get rid of intestinal parasites. You would have to do that every day, and it's going to help to give you good bacteria, so probiotics in your gut, and our gut influences our mood, and our gut influences our immune system. 3 most important things is our brain, our heart, and our gut. And if we can get those things right, then everything is working well. So our bulbine is something that we remember for wounds. It is something that we remember for acne, for skin issues. Bulbine, bulbinella. Why is there a difference between bulbine and bulbinella? Bulbine is normally a little bit smaller. Bulbinella is just a little bit bigger, but they are the same plant effectively. Okay, and they have very similar properties to aloe vera. When we're talking about these natural healing plants, also make sure that you identify things correctly. I had a lady message me in the week, and she said, somebody has given her this plant, and this is the plant this person has told her that it's good for her eyes. She should use the plant on her eyes. And when I looked at the plant, I realized that this could be one of very, very many different types of that particular species of plant, some of which are not good for the eyes and in fact can be damaging, and some of which are okay for the eyes. And so make sure that you identify your plants correctly. There's some wonderful apps out there that you can use to identify plants. Just take a picture. And nowadays it's so easy. If you take a picture of a plant on your phone, and then you open that picture in your gallery, next to your gallery, typically you will see 3 dots or a dot, or if you tap and hold that screen, you will find these little dots, and there's something comes up that says Google Lens. Google Lens. What it's going to do is going to take that picture and it's going to compare it to millions of pictures online, and it's going to find a picture that is identified and tell you what that thing is. Even then, be careful, because one plant can be a part of a species like the sour fig, and then there is, dozens of kind of plants within that genre, and it may not be the one that you are looking for. Now, today I want to give you a quick recipe for those who want to detoxify and to boost your immune system, because we are now going to start to head into the autumn. Autumn months at the moment is extremely hot. So this one doubles up as an immune booster. It doubles up as a weight losser. So for all the ladies who want to lose a little bit of weight. And it is a hydrating drink. Not only that, it's very tasty. It's nom-noms. So what you want to do is you want to take some ginger. If you have the full ginger plant growing, use the whole plant. Use the leaf, use the stem. Did you know you could use those? Yes, you can. Then use the leaf, use the stem, and use a little piece of the root. If you're just using the root store-bought, you just need little fingers length, a pinky fingers length of ginger. Okay, you don't even need to scrape the skin off. Just wash it, make sure it's clean, chop it up into little pieces, and put it into a liter of water. To that, you're adding 1 whole lemon. You've got your ginger, you got your lemon, a whole lemon if it's a small lemon. If it's a big lemon, half a lemon is absolutely ample, more than enough. Then you're going to take a teaspoon of 2 different types of seeds, 1 teaspoon of kalunji seeds and 1 teaspoon of chia seeds. And that is it. And you're going to store that in your fridge. So what is it again? It's ginger, a stick of ginger. If you've got the leaves, add the leaves and the stem. Cut that stem open. It's delicious. It's not as strong. It's wonderful. So it's 1 stick of ginger. Okay. It is 1 small lemon or a half of a large lemon. And then it's the 2 seeds, kalunji and chia seeds. Why are we doing that? So kalunji is going to help to clean out the gut, going to help to heal, but it is also going to add to your ability to balance your blood sugar levels, which leads to weight loss. Chia seeds provides very valuable protein that you need to sustain yourself during the day, to stay hydrated. It is a hydrating seed, to stay hydrated in this warm temperature, and also it helps to reduce inflammation, particularly in the belly. So that is my recipe for you today. I hope you enjoyed today's show, and I hope you will join me again next week for Green Thumbs Up. And remember, today is a very, very beautiful day to be happy. So Until I see you next week, from myself, from brother Asif Fili with me in studio, our sound engineer, from the entire team at Radio Al Ansar, have a wonderful week ahead. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
What about that tree, so beautiful and green? Can you see the wind brushing those leaves? Look at that fish swimming away in a beautiful ocean under the waves. Do you ever wonder who created this and who created that? Allah created everything. Yellow pink flowers with a buzzing bee. Isn't it amazing how honey comes from bees? Oh look, there's an elephant washing his feet. So many beautiful animals, look and you'll see. Do you ever wonder